functional and what he calls dysfunctional objects. He has been awarded unimaginable 4 visual arts fellowship grants. I think he should maybe share the wealth a little bit from the National Endowment for the Arts. Included in this was the opportunity to spend 6 months in Japan, and he's also spent 6 months teaching and researching in London. He is going to go into some detail about his current projects, some of which can still be seen in Madison right now, yes?
Yep.
All right, so please welcome Tom Loeser.
So I'm supposed to test the volume first. If you're in the back row and you can't hear me, raise your hand. So nobody raised their hand. Good. All right. So thank you very much for coming on this freezing cold night. And I'll try to get you out here before the temperature gets back down to 20 below. And I'm going to jump right in on the PowerPoint. So if you want to do the lights, that's fine. So these are, that's my name, and these are wood type, this is end-grain maple wood type from the Silver Buckle Press across the way in the Memorial Library, which is one of the hidden gems on campus. If you've never made it over to Silver Buckle, figure out a way to go over there and see what they do over there. It's really cool. So I'm going to start with a little bit of hero worship, and it's the only time I'm going to do it during the talk. This is the only work by other people that I'm going to show. This is a chair from 1917 by Gerrit Rietveld, a Dutch furniture maker. And it's been a sort of iconic object, and he's been a sort of a hero for me for a long time. And seems to have staying power. And there's a few things I want to say about it. This chair is from 1917. He actually started building versions of it in before that, without the color. But it became the iconic object for the De Stijl movement, whose probably most famous artist would be Mondrian. But I really admire the fact that a furniture maker made this iconic object, and here he is in front of his shop, having a smoke with the boys. And I can't quite tell if that little kid on the left is having a cigarette too or not. His hands are kind of blurry there. It's like they photoshopped his hands in case he does have a cigarette. But I don't know Dutch, but I know enough to know that it says furniture maker up there outside of his shop. And he comes from he's at least a second generation furniture maker. And he's sitting in one of the earlier versions that didn't yet have the characteristic colors of the De Stijl movement. And I think what's going on with this chair is he's really trying to get at the essence of what it means to make a seating device. So it's called the red-blue chair, and the red and the blue are the two planes that support the body in space. The blue supports your butt and the red supports your back. And I think he sort of located those objects in space and then built the structure that's required to hold those two planes where they need to be in space. And it looks sort of complicated and busy with that black stick structure. But if you really do a rigorous analysis of it, there's nothing there that doesn't need to be there to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. The other thing that I think that's amazing about this is it's 1917. And if you look at this picture, you look at the way these people are dressed, and then you look at the object itself, it's a pretty radical object in 1917. And the thing that I think is impressive is that that chair had never been built to this day. Most of us have seen it in a museum at some point, but if that chair had never been built, and somebody came up with it today out of the blue, it would be immediately on all the design blogs the next day. So it's an incredible sort of staying power, and I think it comes from that purity of vision and sort of rigorous analysis and getting at the essences of things. And so that's what I admire about the work. He's actually done a lot of significant work over the years, and that simple table in the upper left is the subject of a really nice piece of writing in Art in America by Scott Burton, the sculptor. If you want to read more, track down that piece of writing. It'll make you really appreciate that piece. He spends a good bit of the article talking about that yellow stick that's poking out of the top. But it's my favorite analysis of what's important about this work. So jumping into my own work, my training was at Boston University. It was really in traditional woodworking and furniture making. My primary instructor was trained in Sweden. And it was a very rigorous skills training, but I just was fortunate in one of those situations where I was there with just a really fantastic group of peers and co-students that have remained my friends ever since, and I think sort of elevated the dialogue quite a bit. And so you can see here I was playing around with that black stick structure. This work would have never, this is a low coffee table, this work would have never made it into the style movement because it has too many diagonals and it's too playful. But I was, partly just interested in working with that visual vocabulary, and also thinking a little bit sort of from a more like a architectural, perhaps Jetson cartoon kind of architectural visual vocabulary. I also learned, or tried to learn, working with various different kinds of materials. So we worked with an upholsterer a little bit, and I learned a lot of respect for the skill set that specialists in different mediums have, and learned I'm not very good at upholstery and better to use professionals who actually know what they're doing. This is a love seat for two people who become progressively more friendly as they move backwards. And so wood has been really my ongoing primary material. It's the material that I think most comfortably in. If you were in my shop, you'd see primarily woodworking tools. And I think a lot about the structure and what's going on with the material. This is not that old of a piece. This is a piece I did here a few years ago when we had a chance to collaborate with the Forest Products Laboratory, which is a national wood laboratory which is located on the western end of campus. Another really great tour. They give a tour every day. And one of the main things they do is wood testing, stress testing. And so I gave them a bunch of, in this case, white oak pieces of wood, which they crushed in a giant hydraulic press. This piece on the right, the wood failed at about 40,000 pounds of pressure per square foot. And it's all, you're watching it on a computer screen, you're seeing how much pressure they're applying to the wood. And it says 40,000, and then all of a sudden you see the failure, and the thing angles down. But then even in this compressed state, it levels out at about 10,000 pounds of pressure. So it's still plenty strong. I made the piece to sort of visually talk about a piece that's overstressed, but it's perfectly strong. But I also thought there's a certain kind of beauty in seeing how the material fails. The failure itself has some beauty. I work a lot with color and also with carving, and I'm very interested. So this is a full-size, king-size bed, and I work a lot with stripes. You'll see as I go through the work. And I can't completely explain why I like stripes, but I'm interested in color relationships and how color interacts, and then I think I like the sort of the way I can use the stripes as a compositional element to help with how somebody reads a piece visually. So this is a detail that gives you a little bit of sense of how the carving and the paint interact. I carve sometimes with power tools, sometimes with hand tools. I love to carve. It's sometimes very slow and time consuming, but it's work that I enjoy. And then I use color along with the carving, and very often I allow the wood to show back through. So the sort of red stripes that you see between the colored stripes, that's the wood itself showing back through the paint. This is a set of, I designed this folding chair as an attempt to come up with a production item that would come efficiently from a sheet good. And it's an idea that's much more out there in the world now since CNC routers have become so common. But in that day, we didn't really think in CNC terms. And I wanted to see what I could get developing three-dimensional form from a flat sheet good. So you're looking at the same piece in two formats. In the right-hand lower picture, it's a folding chair. It's hanging on the wall. It has a wall bracket. It's really a two-dimensional object. And it unfolds and becomes this three-dimensional seat. This was the prototype where I wasn't quite sure if I was making a real chair or just a piece about chairs. And that first prototype is quite tricky to sit in. Your right front leg has to become the fourth leg of the chair in order to stay up. And so I worked through this, and I realized that I felt that it was more effective if it actually is a chair instead of just a sculpture about a chair. So this is, I think everybody would recognize that's a shaker situation where chairs are put on the wall. So I was certainly referencing that. Shaker is a very important movement and aesthetic that's been very influential in a lot of my work. And I was certainly borrowing that idea here. So I went on and over the years I made, I'm up to 47 of these chairs. And it evolved, so it has a fourth leg, and I'll show you in a second how it folds from flat. And I generally tended to make them in pairs because I like that image of one flat on the wall and one open in three-dimensional space. And it was a very important piece in my career. I was kind of known as the folding chair guy for a long time, and I got published in a lot of design magazines and invited to speak at design conferences. And I was approached by a manufacturer from Italy and did that sort of dance for a while, and we exchanged plans and negotiated contracts. But interestingly, what they figured out is it's quite a difficult chair to build, and they didn't rip off my design. They were professional. And in the end, they just declined to manufacture it. So I made it in small batches, usually of 6 at a time or 12 at a time. And I quit at 47. I have one more which I've never quite finished, which is in my basement at home. And I just basically got tired of it and decided it was time to move on. But here I can sort of talk you through the sequence of how it folds. So the picture on the left is 2 chairs open, and then if you go to the second one on the right, you can see that front leg, the metal pin comes out, and that front leg folds across under the seat where it's held by a magnet, and then the seat drops down in between the front leg, and then the whole thing pivots flat, and then the flat unit hangs on a wall. So one of the things that's interesting that happens as you start to have more years of work is to look back at your work and see how pieces connect that are quite separate in time. This is a much later piece that I did at Tandem Press here in town. And I was fortunate enough as a faculty member to be invited to come in and work with the master printers. And there is a tradition of constructible prints in the printmaking world. And so I came in with a kind of some folded paper models of an idea for a constructible print, and I thought the master printers would roll their eyes and sort of shame me out of the place and send me back to the drawing board. But they actually loved the idea, and we had a great time, and we developed these 2 prints in the back. If you take those 2 prints and you're willing to cut them up, you can construct this paper chest on the ground. All the parts are there, and what you do is you follow these either cut or fold or score or glue instructions, and you can put the whole thing together. It's a woodblock and silkscreen process where we use very, very raw construction grade fir plywood, which has that very rough texture, and wire brushed it to really bring out that grain texture. And then that became the printing that puts the wood grain onto the paper parts. And if you follow all the instructions, you end up with this fairly useless paper chest of drawers with a working drawer, but not a whole lot of structural integrity. You could probably fill it up with styrofoam peanuts. But it's more, I think, there's a really obvious connection to the folding chair in terms of moving from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions flat form, which I'm very, very interested in. Transformative pieces that move and have, you'll see quite a bit of kinetic stuff as I go on through the work. One of the things about wood is it's so beautiful that sometimes it can be a problem, and it can be very tempting to get sort of caught up in the beauty of the material. And so I've periodically really enjoyed working with non-precious materials. I did a body of work working with a pickup truck load full of cardboard, corrugated paper that I got from a box factory that had, they were just wrong size boxes that they made a mistake, and they gave it all to me for free actually. And some of it had, and so what I did is I took the paper and I glued it up into very, very large chunks of corrugated paper. Sometimes I glued other kinds of paper in between. For example, this one I glued some colored paper in between the corrugated paper. And then when I had these big chunks of wood, I went on a very large bandsaw and I milled those chunks of paper, I milled those chunks of paper as though they were a log. And I tried to cut through in as many different sort of ways as I could to generate essentially what becomes the equivalent of wood grain if you were milling a log. But I really, really liked the process. And you can see that it's just a thing with me that I'm very interested in surfaces. And I do a lot with applying surfaces with color and carving and so forth. But what was interesting with the cardboard is that the surface texture is really